This story sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood movie, but it's not. This is the real-life account of one of Germany's boldest bank heists ever. A story that involves a quiet holiday weekend, a seriously big drill, and a vault that was supposed to be impenetrable. So let's break down exactly how they pulled it off. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of the heist, I want you to just think about the human side of this for a second. For hundreds of people in the city of Gelsenkirchen, a peaceful holiday weekend just turned into an absolute nightmare. Can you imagine showing up to your bank and seeing it surrounded by police tape? That sinking feeling as you realize your life savings, your family heirlooms, everything you thought was safe could just be gone. It's a total loss of control. And the scale of this thing is just mind-boggling. The official estimate for the stolen cash, gold, and jewelry is over 30 million euros. But get this. That's just the insured value. The real number could be way, way higher, and we'll get into why in just a little bit. So how did a crime this huge even get discovered? Well, it wasn't some dramatic alarm or a high-speed chase. No, it all started with something completely ordinary. A fire alarm, just quietly going off in an empty bank on a Monday morning. So the fire department shows up, right? They're geared up, ready to fight a blaze. They sweep the entire building, floor by floor, looking for any sign of smoke, any hint of a fire. But there was nothing. The place was totally silent, and from the outside, it looked perfectly secure. It's not until they get down to the basement that they find the source of the alarm. And it wasn't a fire. It was a massive, gaping hole that had been drilled right through a reinforced concrete wall, leading straight into the bank's vault. And inside, hundreds of safety deposit boxes just ripped open and completely empty. The only reason anyone found out is because of a random fire alarm. Pure chance. The damage to the bank's customers was just devastating. We're talking about an estimated 90%, 90, of all safety deposit boxes being cleaned out. For almost everyone who had something stored in that vault, it was all gone. Okay, so this brings us to the big question. How on earth did they do it? This was not your average smash and grab. This was a sophisticated, meticulously planned operation, almost like a military mission. And it happened right under everyone's noses. As the police started to put the pieces together, a very clear strategy began to emerge. You see, this whole thing was a multi-stage plan that required some serious precision, heavy-duty equipment, and a whole lot of patience. These guys had a blueprint, and they followed it perfectly. It really breaks down into 3 key phases. First up, access. The crew used a parking garage right next door as cover, which let them get to the bank's weakest point without anyone noticing. Second, the breach. They brought in heavy machinery, a massive core drill to literally punch a hole through the reinforced basement wall. And finally, the best part for them, the loot. Thanks to a long holiday weekend, they had hours, maybe even days to just work away in peace and empty the whole place. Using a long holiday weekend like that is actually a classic move. A criminologist named Michael Levy points out that it's a textbook strategy. It's all about hitting a target when security is at its lowest and nobody's around. In fact, we saw the exact same playbook in London's famous Hatton Garden robbery back in 2015. It's a proven tactic because it gives the thieves the one thing they need more than anything else, time. So the crew just disappears without a trace. And this leaves investigators with the biggest question of all. Who was behind this? But even more importantly, who on the inside gave them the help they needed? See, experts like Professor Levy are pretty much certain this wasn't just brute force. The thieves knew the bank's layout with incredible accuracy. They knew exactly where to drill to avoid triggering any sensors, and they knew how to deal with the alarms. That kind of detailed knowledge, well, it almost always points to an inside job. And that completely changes the investigation, doesn't it? Suddenly, the police aren't just looking for the guys who handled the drill. They're hunting for the person who drew them the map. So the police are now casting a really wide net. They're looking at anyone and everyone who had access to the bank's security secrets. That means current employees, former employees who might have a grudge, the outside contractors who actually installed the security systems, and even the staff at the security companies hired to watch the place. All right, let's zoom out for a second. Where does this Gelsenkirchen heist really sit in the grand scheme of things? We've talked about the how and the potential who, but what's the bigger picture here? How significant was this crime really? Well, Professor Levy actually calls this a spectacular heist. He's putting it in the absolute top tier of bank robberies.
And while a crime of this size is super rare for any one city, he says that from a criminologist's point of view, it's actually a predictable event. The methods, the patterns, they're all known. It's just a question of when and where the next crew decides to try it.
And this brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story. We might never know how much was actually stolen. That $30 million number, that's just what was insured. It's kind of an open secret that people use safety deposit boxes to store things off the books. Cash and valuables they don't want the tax man to know about. And if your hidden stash gets stolen, you can't exactly go file a police report for it, can you? So the real take could be just astronomically higher than any official number.
And that leads to this really interesting final thought from Professor Levy. If these security weaknesses exist, and the playbook is out there, the real question isn't just how this happened, it's why doesn't this kind of thing happen way more often?
When you get right down to it, the Gelsenkirchen Heist is a pretty powerful reminder of something. In our world of high-tech security, we can always build thicker walls or design fancier alarms. But at the end of the day, a system is only as strong as the people who have the keys. The biggest vulnerability isn't always a bug in the software or a crack in the wall. Sometimes it's a flaw in human trust. And that's maybe the biggest takeaway from the $30 million hole in the